My favorite cartoon is back with a new lease on life, baby, and across both YouTube and Twitter polls, you guys have made it plenty clear that you'd rather all 4 episodes be discussed in one video. Can't say I blame you, especially given the analysis I'm about to walk you through. It makes all the sense in the world that these 4 episodes are viewed as a collective piece, both thematically and in regards to covering a lot of the show's range of subject matter and tone. That said, this video will be operating under the assumption that you're already a fan of this show and that you've already seen these episodes, so tell me how you felt about the premiere or my thoughts in the comments, and let's waste no more time. AKA where it turns out that Jasper's literally just Katsuki Bakugo. And just like Bakugo, I've never fully understood the massive fanbase they have. Now don't get on my case, I'm not a Jasper hater or anything, I've just never gotten how fandoms can be so unironically appreciative of characters who just constantly have the harsh, angry dial turned up to 11, or always yelling or making their insecurities other people's problems. With that said, Little Homeschool offers to give Jasper some more nuance as a character, with her and Steven coming to something of an understanding in the only language Jasper seems to speak with any fluency, that being fighting! It's interesting to see Amethyst having basically given up on Jasper during the time skip, given how much it seemed we were building to a mutual understanding between them. I'd be interested to learn just how and why Amethyst got so dismissive toward her. Just as interesting is seeing Jasper in a fairly unantagonistic role for once, all things considered. Thinking about the quote-unquote villain shot in the opening theme, it lends credence to the theory that this shot is largely symbolic, and that the characters depicted here may be entities that Steven clashes with, but not necessarily villains. At the same time, if that's the case, then it might also suggest that the mind control theory is right, and that we'll see all these characters who oppose Steven without necessarily being evil made to become flat-out antagonists due to the influence of this big worm. In eventually indulging Jasper's desire to fight him, Steven goes into what I'll call pink tantrum mode, in what's sure to be his primary source of conflict throughout the series. Now this is intriguing because the common theory or assumption at the moment is that Steven turns pink when angry. And while that definitely seems to be true, I think it's a case of correlation but not causation. No, I think Steven's pink tantrums stem not solely from anger, but more specifically from control issues. This is something I think is only compounded more in the next episode. Little Homeschool definitely feels like the start of something new, insofar as it's justifying the continued adventures of this character by highlighting how Steven still has to figure some stuff out about himself. It's also, however, very mature on Steven's part to recognize the potential for Jasper as a teacher. It shows that whatever the other factors to it might be, Steven immediately recognizes his anger as dangerous, and something that an outside perspective could help him manage. Also, yes? Get dunked on.
All the other gems were corrupted by the diamonds, but you corrupted yourself just to win a fight, which you lost to me!
Ooh, get him! Okay, so to start with, Professor Amethyst is frankly super relatable and maybe even a bit aspirational as someone who wants to be a teacher. What, did you think I was gonna have YouTuber as my professional career? Yeah, right, maybe when this website actually has some competent management. It's just really cool and cathartic to see someone who admits to having lacked a direction in life find it by helping other people realize things about their own wants and talents and how to lead fulfilling lives. But more than that, I think the meat of this story lies with how Steven approaches things. When Amethyst assigns a bunch of homeworld gems to occupations across Beach City so they can be fulfilled, Steven takes it upon himself to help by giving them all different jobs, wary of the idea that they'd be just doing the same things they'd done on Homeworld, stuck in their default settings, as it were. Coming fresh off of the movie, it makes sense for Steven to have this concern. He's seen firsthand his friends all be essentially trapped in their default Homeworld service modes, and so he wouldn't want any other gems to feel boxed into that one way of being. Of course, by episode's end, Steven realizes that the freedom he's granted these gems may just mean the freedom to remain in their comfort zones if they so choose. Now, this seems on its face like something Steven should have and has learned already, but circumstances make it a bit more nuanced, and adds a bit of extra meaning to the show's title beyond just a rebranding and indicator of the time skip. See, Steven's in a paradoxical place these episodes, where his conception of the future only seems to extend to getting away from the past. And this need is myopic. Steven's need to help these gems, or Jasper, or Volleyball, as we'll see later, is in a roundabout way really self-serving. He's eager to help everyone else move on from the past because it will finally allow him to move on. Contrast this with official most mature crystal gem Amethyst, who beyond the fulfillment it gives her to help for helping's sake, really doesn't consider herself at all when assisting the other gems. The movie was all about Steven confronting the idea of happily ever after and accepting that he won't and shouldn't ever be okay with stagnating. But as Steven confronts gems who are to varying degrees stuck in the past over the course of these episodes, we see there's clearly still the part of him that just wants to be finished with all of Pink's BS, which manifests as him needing to almost eradicate any sense of attachment to the Era 1 and 2 days in himself and others. And it's that instinct, I think, that desire to exercise control finally closing the book on his mom's presence, that activates the Pink tantrums. This part of him, I think, clashes with the part of him that doesn't actually want to be done. Without realizing it, he seems to have no direction, no future if he's not helping people. So he's overcompensating and going full control freak so he can feel like he's doing something. To make a very long ramble short, I think there's two equal and opposite instincts inside Steven that need to coalesce before he's ever able to properly control his Pink side. This is all pretty heady stuff. Before I move on, I suppose I should also mention that Guidance is a laugh riot of an episode. Nanafua's Ruby guards yoinking money in exchange for flowers, a roller coaster explodes, and that's okay. And Little Larimar is my new favorite.
Human screams are my favorite of the Earth's delights. I want to hear the human screams forever.
Okay, that's kind of troubling.
This show is often at its funniest when some cockamamie plan of Steven's thrusts the boardwalk into complete chaos, and this episode was a great mix of off-the-wall comedy, complete with best fusion smoky quartz, as well as a relatively low-key bit of exploration for Steven and Amethyst, which for a while now has been one of the best relationships on the show. AKA where Steven and the Rose Quartzes are basically Gamora and Nebula. I feel like this is the most real episode of the bunch, where Steven meets a trio of Rose Quartzes, which is understandably super awkward given how their image is associated with his mom. We also get to check back in with the Famethyst and the Zoomins, which puts to rest a lot of concerns that I know that we had lying over from the end of last series. I like how the Rose Quartz trio that we deal with in this episode feel like they each embody a major trait of Pink Rose as Steven and the audience have come to understand her. Using the names that they're given in the episode credits, Superfan Rose is the peppy, silly, in love with life side, Hippie Rose is the lax, chilled out side, and Shy Rose, who looks most like our Rose, is the clever, stoically empathetic, and self-aware side who kept her feelings bottled up. Taken apart, they're very obviously three very different gems, but encountered as a group, it's easy to see how Steven sees his mom in their collective presence. And while none of them are voiced by Susan Egan, there's a lot of deliberate, subtle callbacks to our Rose, both in the vocal performance and the way that they're framed in certain scenes. Lo and behold, just as I was thinking of the Quartzes as potentially sibling figures for Steven, the show itself comes out and refers to them in those explicit terms. It's a really interesting and relatable case where Pink is the abusive, neglectful parent who kind of ruins her children for each other. But Future isn't the first piece of fiction to directly confront this notion. The idea that siblings who suffered under a parent, especially before really getting to know each other, can only see their parents in each other. Logistically, you know it's not each other's fault, but all you can perceive your siblings as is a remnant of the parent. Much like his struggle between past and future, it's a bizarre paradox for a character as empathetic as Steven. Empathy requires looking outside oneself, which is something Steven does naturally, but in this specific instance, he really can't bring himself to do it. No one in the episode can. For most of it, Steven just can't see the roses for what they actually are, both independently and to him, because he's too busy using them as a prism through which to view his mom. I look forward to seeing this dynamic explored, be that in big or small ways, later on down the line. How has this not come up in the 2 years before now? I'm sorry, this is probably my only major complaint with any of these episodes, but it is a pretty major one, I think. I refuse to believe that Volleyball, or Pink Pearl as she was formerly known, hasn't appeared and hashed things out or at least gotten properly acquainted with Steven and other Pearl within the 2-year time skip between now and Change Your Mind. Like, what has she been doing all this time? It's one of those things that makes the time skip unfortunately feel kind of arbitrary, beyond letting Zach Callison use his natural speaking register. And something of a reservation I guess I still have with the series is that this might happen too often. And we might be left with episodes broaching topics that don't really make sense to be only handled for the first time in this new status quo. That said, the rest of the episode more than makes up for this slight oversight, I think. Once again, there's some straight-up gut-busting laughs, but of course, the main central core of the story is the emotional resonance between the Pearls. Specifically, we get a hella awesome fusion, which the credits title as Mega Pearl, which, yes, And man, did I not expect to leave with a new ship this early into the show. It's the bit with the pearls at the end that I think particularly underscores how Future, through the device of Steven's pink tantrums, is going to lend a little bit more relief and context as to Pink's actions and demeanor. There's a lot of blank spots in Pink's history for the audience and for Steven, and now we know that she had this really big mistake partially out of her control looming in her memory. The pearls certainly seem to agree that Pink actively regretted what happened with Volleyball, and if we take them to be correct, then how much was Pink's destructive capabilities informing her behavior and choices thereafter? Did she perhaps ditch a clingy Spinel, for instance, because confronting her exasperation directly would make her risk blowing up and hurting her? Now you might say I'm giving Pink too much credit, and Lord knows some of you already have, but I think it honestly adds yet another layer of depth and tragedy to her character. Depending on how this is further explored, Pink might end up feeling like a character trapped by her very nature to always be a harmful presence to those around her. That's not to excuse any of Pink's mistakes, but maybe they're coming from a more thoughtful place than we all initially assumed. Something interesting that I'm surprised no one has thought to make a big deal out of over the course of this entire show, myself included, is how Steven Universe regularly positions gem technology as dangerous or incompatible with the protags, which is, of course, something that happens again here in the form of Shell. Obviously, it's an easy way to have action beats where the gems give it their all in a fight without the risk of seriously hurting anyone, but I think it's also been a constant symbol within the show of how all this stuff represents eras 1 and 2 of Homeworld, and how deeply entrenched the issues of gem culture are that most attempts to visit their own history put the characters at risk. The crystal gems to start with, but at this point every gem exists in a culture that's grown so far past eras 1 and 2 that despite being super advanced and leagues ahead of Earth tech, it's obsolete now, and especially as gems better integrate themselves into human society, you gotta wonder if we're just going to keep progressively dismantling remnants of Homeworld tech across the show. Overall, Steven Universe Future got to a hecky of a good start. It feels simultaneously like a different animal and yet at the same time like the show hasn't missed a step, and I'm more than looking forward to seeing how we expand on things and explore new creative scenarios over the course of this month and the rest of the show's run. Like and subscribe if you're interested in hearing more of my ramblings about it in a semi-timely basis.